Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be my most disappointing reads of 2019. Now I'm going to do my top 10 reads of 2019 and I'm also going to do a video of New Year challenges. I have been slowly recovering from a cold, so that's why I haven't been as efficient and quick on the mark as a lot of other booktubers have been. But I am ready to discuss some of my most disappointing reads. I thought I would do my most disappointing first, and then that means I can get that out of the way and we can focus on the upcoming more positive. But a lot of people do disappointing reads, and there are a few that I really didn't enjoy this year that I will go through with you now. So I'm not doing them in a particular order because I kind of feel a bit samey about all of these reads. So I'm just going to do them as I've written them down on this piece of paper. So the first one I want to talk about is the most recent of all these books that I read, and that was There by Tommy Orange, which is the last book that I finished in 2019, so I kind of ended it on a bit of a sourer note. But I just didn't seem to get on with this book. I don't know whether that's because I was kind of feeling a bit under the weather when I read it. It's a series of kind of interconnecting stories of Indigenous people living in America. It is a specific American location, but I've taken the book back to the library, so I can't remember which kind of state it was based in. But it all centres around this powwow that's happening in that city, and all these different characters. Some of them are third or fourth generation Indigenous, some are mixed race Indigenous, and they are all going to meet at the powwow. And it has catastrophic events at the end. A really catastrophic incident happens at the end of the book. So the story is meant to be a slow burn into this and create a kind of building up a pressure to this big ending. However, unfortunately for me, I kind of lost interest, so the ending really was a bit of a damp squib for me. I wasn't interested in the event by that point. I don't know whether it's because it's written by a male. I know a lot of people on BookTube say that sometimes reading male authors is very different from reading female authors, and the book focused a lot on kind of drug use. All the main characters were predominantly male. There was a few women, but it was kind of almost women were alcoholics in this book. There wasn't that many really kind of inspirational women. It was a tale of kind of the Indigenous culture and the woes that have happened and how that's affected generations, but the men were young men in the novel were getting into drug use, trying to make money fast, kind of showing that they didn't have careers or opportunities in the same way. But that made for quite bleak reading, and there was no hope for their future in the book. It felt kind of despondent, and I did not connect with that at all. So I know a lot of people have really enjoyed this. I know that Jasmine over at Jasmine's Reads really enjoyed this book, but I didn't, unfortunately. And then the next one I want to talk about is Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. So this book, I really wanted to love it because I know so many people rave about A Visit from the Goon Squad, which is one of her books that is her most popular work, and I thought if I really enjoyed this I would go into that. I don't know whether overall with this book it's kind of the subject matter that has disconnected me from it. There will be a little bit of a theme in here because a lot of the books that I've decided I don't enjoy kind of have an overall gangster storyline. So somebody's involved in kind of selling of something or in dodgy dealings. So this one focuses on Anna Kerrigan and Dexter Stiles. So Anna's father was embroiled with Dexter Stiles, who's a bit of a gangster in this novel, and he kind of does some dodgy things. And Anna's father gets embroiled in a situation, and then we believe he's kind of been killed off. And Anna meets Dexter later in life. She met him as a child when she visited his house when Anna's father was dealing with him, working with him, however you want to phrase it. And then she meets him on later in life, and they have this kind of fleeting romance, and then we find out what happened to Anna's dad. But it was all very slow. I didn't connect to the characters very well. On reflection, I can't really remember much of the storyline, and then interspersed with that is Anna's desire to learn to be a deep sea diver. She works the docks and she's helping it out with the war effort, and kind of really wants to be involved in deep sea diving. And so there's a lot, pages and pages of explanation of how you put the suits on, how you have your oxygen tanks and the whole process, which for me was a little bit dull. And I know that Jennifer Egan must have done a lot of extensive research and wanted to prove that she knew how the process worked. but that didn't give for very entertaining reading, I'm afraid. So I got a little bit bored, and again, this was another book that I was flicking towards the end of, disconnected from how it was going to end. Unfortunately, there's not much more I can say about it. And then the next one is The Buried Giant by Kazu Ishiguro. Now, I really wanted to like this. I think I got this a little bit confused with another of his novels. So this one is not what I expected at all. It was a little bit of a fable fantasy. It's set in King Arthur's times, and it follows a couple, Axel and Beatrice, who kind of end up having to go on a quest. And there's this invisible kind of smog that keeps meaning that people all over the country are just forgetting what happened, and there's a big trauma that we need to find out about, and there's secrets between Beatrice and Axel within their marriage, and things come to light in a fable style story. I just didn't connect with this at all. I understood at the end the overall point it was making, and he is very perceptive and intelligent, but I don't know whether the fable style didn't work for me. Again, this was a very slow story. Doing a quest, and they come out of these rabbit holes where they lived, and they move all across the country, across England, to follow kind of a bit of a Lord of the Rings style quest to find answers, and it just was dissatisfying overall for me. It went on for too long, wasn't really much plot, and I just didn't connect with it. I know it's a bit hit and miss, and it was a miss for me. And then the next one is A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush by Eric Newby. So my brother recommended me to read this, and I can kind of tell by all these other books that overall travel books, adventure stories seem to not kind of be my favourite thing in the world. So this follows Eric Newby, who ends up going on a kind of quest style travel around the Hindu Kush, and he goes with a friend who he's kind of got connections through journalism, so he kind of writes a piece on this. He's an amateur, he has no experience of climbing, and then goes and walks the Hindu Kush, which is a very difficult walk style, hike, trek, travel, quest, whatever you want to call it. Obviously they end up getting into all kinds of scrapes and scraps. Travel writing, I don't think is for me. It was just an exploration of their experience, where they camped, what political issues they came across, how they were surviving the terrain, accidents that ensued. That was very tedious for me, and maybe the reason I didn't enjoy it as well as it wasn't a personal choice of a reading style that interested me. I was kind of recommended to read it, and I just didn't get on with it. I didn't have enough to stimulate me. I know it's a classic in travel writing, but it just didn't hit the mark for me, I'm afraid. And a lot of these books, unfortunately, it sounds like I'm not saying a lot about them, but I don't have a lot to say. A lot of them are similar points, that they were cumbersome to read, that they weren't engaging, so there's that one. And then the next one was On the Road by Jack Kerouac. It's considered another classic. This is also another novel where the characters travel. This one I particularly hated a lot more than, say, A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush or The Buried Giant, which also kind of had travel adventures in it. This, because I don't think On the Road has aged very well. So it follows Sal Paradise and Dean Moriarty, who end up travelling around America. So Dean Moriarty is a bit of a dropout, and at certain points he kind of gets Sal to follow him to random parts of America, and they are characters who float around, have no connection to a job, stability, a house. They use women as commodities, they switch between women, they have no loyalty to one another or to a set place. There is nothing stable in the whole plot line. And after I read this, I discussed this with my mother, and my mother quite enjoyed the book when she read it, and I kind of had a conversation and a discussion with her, and I said I believe maybe it's just not aged well, because in this modern day and age, to see these men who are deplorable, they don't have a job, they have no ambition, they are slovenly and slobs, and they just are out for themselves and instant gratification in the things that they do. The way they treat women in this novel, women are just seen as ways to extend pleasure, that they don't have a character, that they will cheat on women and switch women, and that there's nothing tangible, logical, progressive in this novel, I find difficult. I don't necessarily have to like characters, but I need to see something go somewhere for me to be enjoying it, and this is pages of just stagnant description or floaty interludes of how they've got from one space to another, which is never really explained either. They just kind of hop onto something, whether it's a train or whatever, and just land somewhere else for a period of few months. But it was very tedious hearing pages and pages of a few months with little that differentiated the days from another. And then they get themselves in trouble, or they get bored and they move on, drink excessively. I just really didn't enjoy that, and maybe it is a position of my reading. I haven't been aware in recent years, but I definitely think I do read more women authors than I do male, and maybe it's because I just connect with the feminine experience, and a lot of my favourite characters are female, and very kind of troubled or confused or complex female characters. And I haven't got anything against male characters or male authors, but I think this chauvinistic energy is something that I don't really enjoy in writing and in my reading experiences. And another one that's a little bit similar that I can link on from is Hot Water Music by Charles Bowatsky. That was a series of short stories about writers in America, and that was very similar in tone. So all these writers had alcohol problems, all these writers had kind of infatuations with women that was fleeting, and that they would change their mind, and that women again were an extension of this instant gratification pleasure centre, and how these writers were intrinsically depressed, their life had no focus, also slobs, and no real story in that collection differentiated at all from the others. It was all one big conglomeration of a similar theme, and I find that very boring to read about. That, oh, I'm a writer, I'm a troubled writer, I've just had so much to drink and so many drugs, and I've slept with so many people, and I lack all meaning and focus, and that's what it means to be a writer. I don't buy it. I don't enjoy it. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that's BS, personally. I don't think you need to be ridiculously troubled and have so many alcohol and drugs and sex addictions to be a writer or a soul that can write. I think that's poppycock. I think with the fiction that comes out nowadays, people's imagination and how they can connect and their experiences can inflect a story, but I think an author and a piece can be entirely separate, and you don't have to have had trauma in your past life to write about anything, or have anything of, or nobody can value your writing unless you have. I don't agree with that. And this egotistical sphere of a writer that was projected in all these stories, how the writer is the all and end all, and kind of a lot of boy style writing was in it, boy-esque humour, in the sense that excessive drugs, excessive sex, conversations about bowel movements and grotesque layers in his writing was just a bit of a put off for me. So I did not get on with that. Then the only book that I ended up DNAing this year was 3 Day Road by Joseph Boyden, and this is a Canadian author, and it was meant to be an Indigenous story as well. Maybe I just don't like those kind of stories. I don't know. This is all still an experiment for me. Personally, I really struggled to finish this one. So this follows Xavier, and he had a friend, and they went off and fought in the war, and Niska is his auntie, I believe, and finds him after the war and kind of helps him recover, and we hear her story of how the French invaded her area of Canada, how she fell in love with a French soldier who then used and abused her. And again, it's that connection between the encroachment of a different culture on the Indigenous culture and how that affects everything, and how Xavier was working in this war environment and was kind of being institutionalized by the white people, and how he felt about that. But though, again, it's so sparsely written, it's so dragged out to get to the crux of the plot and to have these wider explanations. For a period of time, we hear passages of Niska just living in the Indigenous kind of forest land on her own. Nobody else is with her. She's trying to survive and live off the land. that was a little bit boring, and then she meets him. That juicy story was very fleeting. She's back on her own again. There's a lot of getting in canoes and going across the landscape, and a lot of at night fires and chanting to try and make Xavier better again because he's poorly from the war and injured. I got about halfway and I thought, I don't know where this book is going to end because it's been going on for so long and it's not proceeding in the natural direction of an ending, that I just made the executive decision to stop reading it. So I just couldn't really connect with that. And then I've got two more. I've got three more. So the next is A Girl in Winter by Philip Larkin. I actually had to go back onto Goodreads to figure out what this book was about because I'd completely forgotten. Now, Philip Larkin isn't really renowned for being a writer. He is more famously known for being a poet, and a very good poet. But it follows Catherine Lind and Robin Fennell. And that is realistically all I can glean out of my Goodreads account. I can't remember what it's about. I think it's loosely connected to, I think Robin ended up getting pregnant from a teacher and Catherine is kind of relaying the story. I think that's what happened, but I really cannot remember the story at all. I remember thinking it was very bland, no texture to it, and maybe because he's used to writing poetry. I don't naturally think that poets can naturally, just because they're good poets, be good writers, and writers be good poets, vice versa. I think they're completely different art forms and they take excessive experience and building to be good at either, let alone both. I think some people have a natural affiliation, natural connection better than others to one of those forms, or even both, but poetry is more contained and precise and smaller, and a novel is all about pace and kind of keeping somebody engaged for longer. But this book just didn't have any factor, let alone the wow factor. For me, it was just very non-dimensional, unfortunately, so I just didn't get on with that. And then the next one is Brighton Rock by Graham Greene. Now this again is a bit of a gangster story. This is set in Brighton, where he is a new leader of a gang and he goes and kills somebody at the beginning of the novel. Can't remember his name. He's loosely linked to a lady called Ida who he'd met hours before he died. She is she's kind of a prostitute slash she kind of is a singer at one of the bars on the Brighton pier. She gets embroiled in this situation and she thinks Pinky is bad news. She knows he killed this guy. Pinky starts a relationship with a woman who he doesn't care about, but she's used to create an alibi for him, and Ida wants to basically prove that he's done all these things and get justice, and it doesn't kind of work out how she would like. This was a story that I didn't connect to. It wasn't necessarily not written well. I think the character development was quite interesting. I did connect with Pinky's story, and Ida was fleshed out quite well. I don't necessarily think the writing was bad. The story just wasn't my cup of tea, unfortunately, with this. I know a lot of people enjoy Graham Greene, and this is classed as a modern classic. But I think with a lot of modern classics, some will resonate with you and connect with you, and others you just kind of miss, and they miss you and you miss the point. It's just the gangster-esque style, and maybe it's just that male patriarchy energy. As the women were seen in this novel either as prostitutes or as expendable. Pinky's new girlfriend, she is literally used as an alibi. They make out that she's very ditzy and she is not clocked on, and Ida is kind of hitting her over the face with the information. She's refusing and she's naive and she's young. That, as a modern female reader, is a little bit tedious. I would have liked the women to have got one over on the men. That would have been an interesting twist, but again, a man wrote this novel, so take of that what you will. Just didn't enjoy it, and because I had such a good reading year overall, so many books I really enjoyed, this one just didn't cut the mustard for me this year. And then the very last one I want to talk about is the worst book that I read in the entire year. This would definitely go as number one, and that's The Anxiety Solution by Chloe Brotheridge. So my sister recommended I read this around about this time last year. She said it was really good with helping her form kind of coping strategies with anxiety. Now, I think a lot of people naturally have periods, maybe periods of the year. Sometimes winter particularly makes people feel anxious. I know that some people get it at certain periods in their cycle, particularly women. Ovulation can cause a lot of anxiety just before that arrives. And sometimes just stress at work and other things. We constantly are fighting a battle with anxiety, and I think most people are, and I think that's a pretty true statement. I don't think it's a preposterous assumption that a lot of us are working constantly under levels of anxiety and stress. And because of the way our work environment is now, it's always longer hours, do more, and we get less relaxed time, and our society, our culture is structured to go, do till you can't do anymore. There's other factors, I think, but anxiety is definitely something that we're all dealing with. So I thought this would be really useful. However, this read like cheesy Instagram posts of just love yourself, just care for yourself, all the cliches, do yoga, eat better, and your anxiety will go. Now, I think anxiety is a very complex issue. I don't think we can just say run-of-the-mill comments about them. Obviously, there have been links with healthier eating and regular exercise. It helps produce a better sleep pattern. A lot of this is common sense that she writes in this. But this whole affirmations, say affirmations to your face in the mirror for 5 minutes, tell yourself how beautiful you are every day. Things that are just unrealistic in our lifestyle and in the culture that we live and the way that we feel about ourselves. I liked that she was radiating positivity in this non-fiction book, but it really didn't give me any tools. It was just very Instagrammy, just spammy of just love yourself, with no practical tools of how to get there. I don't want to give myself affirmations every morning in front of the mirror. I eat a healthier diet, I do exercise regularly. In the last year I made more of a concerted effort to do that, and that helps short term, but for people who have anxiety and long-term mental health issues, those aren't always going to eradicate the problem. So I think we need a lot more research and a lot more concerted effort to discuss anxiety, not Instagrammy and not as let's just switch the internet off and then the world will be a better place. Let's try and figure out how we can make more long-term goals. So I found it really frustrating and not very helpful, because I don't really do the Instagrammy sepia filter of just being more positive and all that kind of jazz, so I didn't get on with that book at all. So those are all of my 10 most disappointing reads of 2019. There were some similarities in the books, clearly travel novels, gangster style novels, and kind of male-centred protagonists have seemed to come up as possible themes of things that I don't like. But I would love to know some of the books that you really didn't enjoy, or whether any of these books were on your favourite list or your most disappointing list of this year, and we can have a little chat in the description down below. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.